All right, welcome back. SA Today with myself, Liesl Wilson, continues. In other news now, we've seen that Finance Minister Inonkolo Dongwana says that the re-election of President Cyril Ramaphosa as ANC leader bodes well for economic policy continuity.
The outcome of this conference confirms that policy continuity. The economic policy belongs to the party. The president is an agency in carrying that policy. To the extent that we've elected the same president, hopefully now we're going to ensure continuity in policy implementation.
All right, so to help us discuss the Finance Minister's economic outlook is Standard Bank Chief Economist Goolam Ballim. A very good afternoon to you, Goolam. Thank you for joining us here on the SABC.
Hello, Liesl. Thanks for having me.
On the back of the top 7 announcement, perhaps as we wait the NEC and additional members to be announced, any surprises on the strengthening of the rand since that top 7 announcement?
So as we entered the phase of the elective process, there was a notable weakening in the rand and some softness in the stock market. But the fact that the rand has advanced quite briskly and the stock market with an emphasis on stocks geared to the local economy, such as banks, that have rallied anything between 3 and almost 5%, is a very clear signal that the so-called top 7 is endorsed by the markets as emblematic of continuation of the reform agenda.
Well, speaking of the reform agenda, I wonder how you'd weigh in on, looking at confidence in the party to date from investors. What are the expectations and really what needs to be addressed urgently to ensure that the cost of doing business in South Africa is reduced and that the public at large also benefit?
Lisa, that's an incredibly broad and weighty question in terms of what needs to be done. But I suspect we can categorize it into 2 broad elements. The first would what we would refer to as institutional reform, meaning repairing the institutional foundations of South Africa, stretching all the way from the National Prosecuting Authority, the Revenue Service, police services, investigative bodies, for example. And in that respect, what we do note is that during President Ramaphosa's first term, there has been much repair after what many would consider to have been a butchering phase in the era of President Cyril Ramaphosa's predecessor. The second element of agenda would be, again, what we would refer to as macroeconomic reforms. And you did talk about making the cost of doing business easier, which would broadly fall within that realm. And here there has been progress, admittedly far less assertive than with the institutional reform dynamics. And so, broadly speaking, investors are looking for both these 2 items to continue to show progress. And what would be encouraged to investors is if the macroeconomic agenda shows acceleration in the second term of President Cyril Ramaphosa as ANC president, and perhaps quite plausibly as state president from 2024 onwards. So essentially, and to sum up, the so-called reform agenda may garner greater impetus, and the markets are cheering that.
You speak of institutional reform as well as some of the macro reform that's needed. And let's weigh in on what was said over the past few days. How would you react to, the ANC coming out to say that it wants to cut bureaucracy to really improve the regulatory environment for small business? ANC's National Executive Committee member and Small Business Development Minister Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams also coming out to say that they'll be scrapping licensing charges for informal micro enterprises at a municipal level. Is this enough?
It's not enough, but certainly it is one element of a variety of initiatives that invite attention. I think I would suspect broadly, when we talk about bureaucracy, we're talking of the overarching current of state incapacity. In other words, the state has become a hurdle to the just general functioning of society. So whether it is in the provision of public services, essential public services, or even just in terms of the social welfare and general citizen services that the government provides, either through local government or even provincial government or national government in the form of police services. So the incapacitated state is an overarching dynamic that the ANC has grappled with in recent years, and I would go so far as to say unable to fully resurrect and to fix. But we do hope that the ANC pays greater attention in effectively enhancing public services, or so-called colloquially service delivery. So whether it is in making it effective for businesses to function more efficiently, or delivering the social wage and economic, educational and health services with greater effect. If it means just being able to be a teenager and to go and apply for a driver's license without having to fund it by means of a bribe, something as rudimentary as that, that has become corrupt to the core. This is the breadth of rehabilitation that the ANC needs to instill, both by starting from internal reforms, fixing the ANC itself, ridding it of patronage and corruption, and then staring down the corrupt networks that plague the state.
Goolam, then just very quickly as we wrap up the conversation, is Ramaphosa re-energized as he enters a second term? And will this re-energization, bode well for him, given some of the economic policies that have been implemented in the past 5 years? Do you think, how do you think a second term will bode for him as we look come 2024 and beyond?
So there's a few tailwinds to believe that we will see more, and certainly greater reform agenda and acceleration in the second term. I think firstly, you recognize that this is the second term, at least as ANC president, and this is going to be the term that crafts the president's legacy. Secondly, the Phala matter that brought him close to the brink, in fact, may have cajoled the president into realizing that if he was willing to stay, choose to stay, then he might as well, in his personal capacity, really throw his lot into the second term and be less cautious. And then very lastly, to the extent that the president does come to power, not just with an overwhelming mandate relative to his challenger, but that within the top 7, at least 4 individuals can be considered close allies. And that should embolden him to believe that the reform agenda can be safeguarded more greatly. And of course, we wait for NEC outcome, but at least early indications are suggesting the president will have diminished reason to be glacial.
Right, Goolam Ballim, thank you very much for your time. Chief Economist at Standard Bank, weighing in on the back of the announcement of the ANC's top 7 leadership structure. Again, the rand strengthening by more than 2% to 17 rand 22 cents against the dollar upon that announcement. Again, thank you very much to Goolam for his time. Let's leave that conversation there.